Good morning, everybody. Heather Collins from Siouxland Ag in the classroom here, or Mrs. Collins as most of our students refer. We are outside of Mapleton, Iowa today for our first farm chat of the school year. We're going to kick it off with Dave and Cheryl Bruning and their son Jeff, and they're going to tell us about their farm, and they grow corn, soybeans, and beef cattle. So we're going to hear from them today. A couple of things before we get started. If you are tuning in from your classroom, we'd love for you to tell us where you're tuning in from, who your teacher is, and then throughout the farm chat, go ahead and type in your questions in the comments, and we'll answer your questions as we go, and we'll break for question time. So be sure to let us know who's watching and where from, and type in your questions as you go. We're going to get started. I'm going to switch the mic over to Cheryl, and we'll get started with our farm chat. All right.
Good morning, everyone from Mapleton. I'm Cheryl, my husband Dave, and our son Jeff. So where's everybody tuning in from?
All right, we don't have anyone commenting yet.
No problem.
Just could you tell us a little bit about your farm and where we're at and how long you've been here?
Okay, we live outside of Mapleton. We've been on this location for about 30 years. We have a second location north of Danbury, which actually I grew up there. And I'm fourth generation, our son is fifth generation farmers in this area. And we live just north of Mapleton. And on this farm we grow corn, which you can see behind us, and we also have a soybean field nearby. And right next to us we are standing near one of our feed yards. We're empty right now. Cattle will be coming in about a week or 10 days, and we will have these yards full pretty soon.
All right. So just tell us, Cheryl, what's it like to be a farmer? What's your daily routine, or what do you and your husband or son do to manage this farm?
I should probably let these guys tell more of that story. Living on a farm, there's not necessarily depending on the time of year, your daily routine changes. So one day you may be up at 6 o'clock working some cattle, doing that kind of thing. The next day you may be in the office doing some paperwork kind of thing. We are getting set for harvest on our farm, so about next week things will be gearing up. I know in some parts of Siouxland people are already harvesting. Our crops aren't quite ready for that, and since we also have cattle coming in, we've got 110 things to do for that. So do you guys want to add any extra stuff to that? We've got a shed we're working on getting ready to process cattle in, so we've got some lumber and stuff there. We're trying to get that all in place, so we've got some long days ahead of us.
Trying to get the cattle yards ready for cattle coming in. We've got the manure scraped up in piles, and when we get the crops out, we can haul that out. And we have hauled some dirt in to fill in holes. The rain's kind of washed it out, but we will fix it up before the cattle get in. You ready for that?
You want to talk about getting the combine ready? And I know Jeff's been spending some time getting the combine ready for the field and the other equipment that we're going to need. He's a good mechanic.
All right, so boys and girls, teachers, if you guys have any questions along the way, please let us know. We've got some friends tuning in from Kingsley Pearson. We've got Mrs. Larson's class from Mapleton tuning in, so thanks, guys. Keep it coming. So Cheryl, tell us a little bit about what harvest is going to look like here on your farm, or what happens during harvest.
When we start harvest, we start with high moisture corn, and that is corn that we feed to our cattle. It's harvested at 25% moisture. Most things going into a bin are going to be around 15% moisture. So this is a little higher moisture. It goes into a pit up in our other farm, and it's fed throughout the year to the cattle on that farm. Once the high moisture corn is done, we'll probably go to beans. But who knows? We may even start with beans. It depends on what this weather does. Right now we're standing here in some drippy weather, so it's not fit to harvest anything right now. So we'll see what that weather does to us. And the soybeans, we hope to put some into our bin. What doesn't fit, we may take down to a local co-op and store there. Once we get the corn and the high moisture corn and the beans out, we will start harvesting this corn and combining it. It will not be high moisture corn, it will be dry. It will go into the bins on our farm. We use this corn, a lot of it, to feed our cattle through the year. We also feed our cattle distiller grains, and that is a byproduct of ethanol, if you've ever heard of ethanol. So we try to be efficient on our farm, and we know we're going to have some extra corn. We'll take a load of corn up to the ethanol plant and bring back the wet distiller grains to feed to our cattle along with the rest of their ration.
All right. So do you want to tell us a little bit about the cattle or the kind of cattle that you'll have in these feedlots?
The calves that we have coming in, and the first ones load October 1st. And the majority of our cattle come from the state of Montana. So kids, if you're not quite sure where that state is located, have your teachers show you on a map and maybe target the town of Lewiston. We get a lot of cattle from that area and even a little further west of there. And we also have some cattle coming from Promontory, Utah. So they do have a little bit of a road trip before they get to our place. They round them up at these ranches and load it onto trucks and come straight to our farm. So there's no problems with disease, anything like that. We buy most of our cattle on what we call a video auction. Kind of a unique way. We've been doing it for about 30 years, so more and more people have been starting doing this. I really, really like this method because the representative from the company will go actually to the ranch and they will videotape these baby calves with their mamas, and they'll put together a catalog of all the information about these cattle, and then we log on either to the computer or on a TV channel and watch these videos, and then the bidding is just like a regular auction. You bid on the calves, and then if you're the lucky bidder, you end up with these calves, and you know what date they're going to come to your farm. So like I said, we've got some loading October 1st coming, and most of them are going to be black-hided. It's a program that we use when we raise cattle. You always kind of have your end in mind, what you're going to do with these cattle. So, and we a lot of times go back to the same ranch and buy the same calves. We know we've had great luck with them. We know the temperament of the cattle. We know how they feed. And that's the one thing I love to do, is raise cattle.
All right. So can we take a look at where these cows will live?
Absolutely. Like I mentioned, we don't have any cattle on the place right now. We've been empty for a few months, getting the yards ready and doing a lot of other things on our farm. Because feeding cattle, you're committed and you're tied to that morning and night, and a lot of things in between to take care of them. But we have yards, they're on a nice slope, so when it rains, it will drain. As my husband says, we've got some manure behind me piled up, ready to haul. As soon as the corn that you saw is out, we'll start hauling some manure out there. That's great fertilizer for our crops. So we try to recycle everything. Fertilizer is expensive, so when we can utilize this form of fertilizer, all the better. And if you can see behind me, we've got the feed bunks, and looks like a little bit of a lane with some tracks in it. When we feed the cattle, we drive the feed wagon and tractor right alongside of these bunks and put the feed in, and the cattle get pretty excited and they come up. And you can also see, if Heather's alongside of me, you can also see the concrete out in front of the bunk. So you know what winter gets like in Iowa. It can get a little messy and wet. This gives a great place for the cattle to come up and eat, not have to stand in mud for eating.
All right.
We also bed our cattle in the winter with corn stalks. When a cornfield is combined, there's residue that comes out the back of the combine chopped up. Well, we can come along with a windrower, put that into a nice little row, bring our big baler along and make round bales with these corn stalks, and then we can use those for bedding in the yards in the winter.
Perfect. About how many cattle do you raise each year?
The number varies just a little bit, somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 head on 2 different locations.
Okay. So how much do those calves weigh when they come in, and how much will they weigh when they leave?
Very good question. We usually get them in at about 600 650 pounds to 700 pounds. Some of them are a little heavier. We also know the birth dates of these cattle when they come in. Most of them are born in January and February of this year. So they've gained a lot of weight being on their mamas and being out in the ranches. We feed them through the winter, and in about April, May, June of next year is when they would be ready for harvest. When they go, they are approximately 1,300 pounds.
All right. So we can talk a little bit about what these beef cattle are used for.
Primary function of our beef cattle, what we like to think of is meat. Your ground beef, your steaks, your roasts, all those delicious cuts of beef that you enjoy. There's a lot of auxiliary uses for beef. I don't know if Heather has, and anybody's come to your classroom and talked about those different uses, but they use most every part of the animal. There's very little waste on on steers and heifers when they are harvested. So they use everything from the fur down to the collagen in the bones. All kinds of different things get used to help make products that we need every day.
Awesome. Do you want to talk a little bit about, well, actually, let's break for questions. So
Okay.
So everyone can hear me. If you have any questions, boys and girls, we're going to take time now to ask those questions. So if you have any questions so far about the corn that we've talked about or about the beef cattle in the feedlot, let us know what those questions are so that we can answer those for you. I'm going to give the mic back over to Cheryl. We do have one question about corn and soybeans. Which one sells better, corn or soybeans?
The markets change a lot. We plant more corn than soybeans precisely because we feed the corn to our cattle. And that's hard. That's a very hard question because it's so market dependent. Depending on what the market is at the time. Right now, both corn and soybeans are selling for below the cost of what it costs us to produce them. So, but we still do what we do because we love it, and we are always optimistic that things are going to get better.
That makes sense. Do you want to talk a little bit about what corn and soybeans are used for? You've talked about that you use your corn for feeding livestock, but the other uses for corn and beans.
Well, I did bring some products that some of them may look familiar to you. Let me get rid of this so we can have a free hand. Some of these products may look familiar to you. How many of you made marshmallow s'mores this summer? They use corn in that. Also, you can see the cereal. There's 4 parts to a corn kernel. There's the starch, the protein, the fiber, and the oil. So they break out those different parts, and this particular one has corn meal, which they basically ground the whole kernel, and corn bran, which is the outer part of the kernel. Anybody like ice cream sundaes? We've got corn product in here. Things like this has corn starch. Remember I talked about the starchy part? Also, there's corn syrup made from corn. I hope you all washed your hands at some point today because you can find corn product in soaps, even in batteries, toothpaste. You all brushed your teeth, right? Hope so. Some of you may have glue or glue sticks in your desk. Corn product from that. And even lipsticks. Those are all, and there's dozens and dozens of more products that are made from corn. Then if we move over to soybeans, soybean also has oil in it. Soybean oil is in a lot of our food products. So things like salad dressings. It's also used for, believe it or not, soy sauce, which I love. I don't drink a lot of coffee, but when I do, I like to put a little creamer in it, and that also has a soy product in it. And some of us need to eat gluten-free for allergy reasons, and I would be one of those people. And there is soy lecithin in boxed baked goods, things like this, these products. And lecithin is used as an emulsifier, kind of to keep things together. so it holds together. And this is a little can of stain. There's actually some soy product in stains that people use to stain woodwork, things like that, or a picture frame, something like that, or furniture. And anybody have crayons in their desk? There's even some brands of crayons are made with soybeans. So lots of fun things. Candles are even another product. And the last thing I have in my basket is gum. Gum can have both corn product and soybean product in it. So you can always Google the Iowa Corn Growers or the Soybean Association to see what other products are made from our corn and soybeans right here in Iowa.
All right. Another question. What grows faster, corn or soybeans?
I'm going to pass that one off to the guys.
Corn will get a lot bigger, and it looks like it's growing faster, but they all mature relatively the same time in the fall. We generally plant corn first in April, first part of May. Plant soybeans the first part of May to the middle of May, and then we harvest them all about the same time. So corn looks like it grows a little bigger and faster, but they all take about the same amount of time.
All right. So maybe you guys, since Dave has the mic, you could talk about some of the ways that you employ efficiency or conservation on to the success of your farm.
Okay, as far as conservation, we do some no-till, we do reduced tillage, we have some buffer strips along the river. We have two farms along the river, so we have a buffer strip there to help control erosion and keep the nutrients out of the river. As far as planting and stuff, we use some precision planting equipment. We have individual row shutoffs on the planter, so we use GPS signals that turns those rows on and off as they're needed, so you aren't wasting extra seed on ends of fields or wherever the rows overlap. It's not only waste of seed, but that corn generally will not produce very well because it's too thick and it doesn't grow right. Then when we harvest, we also use GPS in the combine. Maps our yields and keeps track of where the different yields are within the field. It keeps track of different varieties and how they yield and that sort of stuff.
All right. Very good. So we've got another question wanting to know about the difference between the height of corn and soybeans. So how tall does that corn get and how tall does the soybeans get?
Corn can get anywhere from probably 6 to 8 feet, and some of the stuff will get to 10 to 12 feet tall. Sometimes there's different uses for it. They'll use taller corns for chopping for silage. Soybeans are going to be much shorter. They're going to be 3 to 4 feet tall, maybe at the tallest. Sometimes soybeans, if they get too tall, it's not a good thing because they will fall over and then they're hard to combine.
All right. How many soybeans are usually in a pod? Can you show us what it looks like inside of that pod?
You betcha.
Most pods will have 3 beans. Once in a while you'll get one with 4, not very often, and sometimes there'll be one with 2, but most of the time they are
Okay,
3.
this is one beanstalk, and you can see all the various pods on here. There's tons of them, so it's been a good growing season for those. And then as Jeff breaks open that pod, you can see the 3 beans in there that just fell on the ground. I don't know if he caught any of them. But yeah, all that plant's growing quite a few beans.
Since it's cloudy and rainy today, they don't break open very easily, but when they're combining, it's drier. Those will you can just roll them between your fingers and those will all pop out and fall out. It's easier for the combine to clean them up then.
Should we look at the corn? Is there anything you can tell us about the corn cob or? So what kind of corn is this? Is this sweet corn? What do we call this kind of corn?
This is all field corn, we call it, and it's used for like we said before, feeding cattle or the ethanol process. We don't raise any sweet corn. There's very little sweet corn raised around here.
So
this is mature corn. It's going to be ready to harvest in a few weeks.
Am I going to be tough enough?
You can break it open.
I'm not tough enough. Come on, Jeff. Be tough. Be tough. Look at him. Oh! Okay. Talk about the cob.
You got the cob in the middle. That's generally a waste product. We'll run it through the combine. It rubs those kernels off of that cob. It just rolls it around in the combine, and then it sorts it out. And the cob comes out the back of the combine and decomposes, and
Used for organic matter.
It will be organic matter and nutrients for next year's crops.
awesome. How much corn can you harvest in a day? There's variables.
Smaller combine. 75 acres a day is a good day. Sometimes it can be more, sometimes less. It depends on how long a day we can put in. With the cattle around, we have chores to do, and we have to take care of them first
Okay.
before we go to the field to harvest.
Can you, for our students in the classroom, how big is an acre?
An acre is approximately the size of a football field,
Okay.
or about 200 feet square, 200 by 200 feet.
Perfect.
But a football field is very close to an acre.
All right. So if you guys have more questions, chime in, add those in the comments below. We've got a few minutes left. What else do you want to share with our students about your farm, or what it means to be a farmer?
Farming is something I have done my whole life. I was a teacher, so I taught part-time off the farm till probably about 4 or 5 years ago. So hey, if there's anybody from Danbury Catholic, that was my last teaching position. I always loved coming back home after school, coming to the farm, see what was going on with the guys. As I said earlier in this, I grew up on a farm, so it's been my life since I was born. And it's really heartwarming that now we're bringing the 5th generation back to our farm. Our son Jeff, he's married, and they just had a little girl this summer. So who knows, maybe one day we're going to have a 6th generation on this farm. It's a wonderful way of life. It's a great place to raise kids. It's where, you take great pride in the food, the fiber, and the fuel that we produce for the people of Iowa and the people of across the world. Some of our beef actually gets, once it's harvested, gets shipped to Asia for markets over there. So they're looking for a certain kind of beef cattle and the kind that we raise. So our farm products can go just about anywhere in the world, which is wonderful. And I love to talk to people about farming. If you ask people that know me, they say, she's always talking about something about the farm, something about cattle. You can tell it's what we love to do. So when we're out here, whether the weather's a beautiful day, even today's not too bad a day, the dripping has stopped, so we're not getting sprinkled on anymore. But even in those winter days when you love to hunker down inside where it's warm, we've got to be out here and take care of the cattle. That comes first. A lot of times they'll have breakfast before we do. So we want to make sure they're fed, taken care of, and clean and dry.
Someone wants to know if this is a century farm.
No, we're not a century farm. We've only been on this location about 30 years. And our farm north of town, my grandparents moved around just a little bit. And so it'll be a century farm in, I'm thinking, about 20 more years. So kind of a while. But yes, we have several century farms near us. So neighbors that we know that do have century farms. Kind of a really cool deal.
All right. Well, do you have any final comments or things you'd like to share with us about farming or where we're at today?
I just encourage anybody out there listening that if you do have questions about the food that you eat, ask a farmer. Ask someone that has produced that food. There's a lot of things that we read sometimes that sometimes the source isn't always the best. So I guess I live by the mantra is ask a farmer. Ask them what they know, because we're out here to produce the safest food supply we can.
All right. Well, thank you. All right, everyone, that about wraps it up for our first farm chat of the school year. Thank you so much for joining us by Mapleton, Iowa at Dave and Cheryl Bruning's farm. We are going to be available to answer any questions that you might have. If you leave those in the comment section, we'll get back to you. But otherwise, have a great rest of your day, boys and girls. Thank you for joining us, and have a good weekend.